All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 3 of the Game Development Livestream. This is going to be a really, really cool topic today. It is going to be well worth an hour of your life if you are anybody in game design and development. So we're going to be talking about game engines, procedural content creation. We might talk about generative stuff and the difference between the two. But it's going to be really great if you're thinking at all about a new game engine for your project, or switching engines, or want to complain about the engine you're in and think it should be better. We'll talk about that. But let me introduce my co-hosts and guests today. So first, Paul, my co-host.
Howdy, everyone. I'm Paul. Been making games for 25 years now, with a lot of different engines, and surprisingly, a lot of emphasis on doing things procedurally. So I bill myself as a systems designer. So I'm really excited to get into this topic today.
Awesome. And I'm Jon Radoff. I'm the other co-host of this program. I am the CEO of Beamable, which is a game infrastructure company building the back end, the kind of the game engine for the back end, you could think of it. And I'm joined today by Jason Booth, who I worked with on, I got to turn the right direction for my camera, on Star Trek Timelines, this game right here. We worked on that for a few years together, but Jason has a long career doing a lot of cool stuff, even cooler than that. Jason, why don't you give a brief intro of yourself?
I've been in the industry for about 32 years now. Started out doing MMOs, did all those music games, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, that kind of stuff, and done a lot of procedural stuff and generative stuff kind of along the way. Now I'm working for Meta. I also have 52 assets in the Unity Asset Store that are mostly around generating and rendering terrains and shaders and stuff like that.
And no shit, everybody, when I say that Jason is a world-leading expert on this topic, I'm not like kidding. Like, he actually knows this shit. He's built the assets. He's built the tech. He's built inside the end. Like, he builds shader graphs. Like, he knows it all. It's like, so you are going to learn something from this. I don't care how advanced a graphics programmer you are. You're going to learn something from this today. So get on this fucking live stream. We're keeping it real here. All right. And our audience, by the way, you're all game developers. It's fine if you want to see in behind the scenes. That's cool too. Maybe you're a feature game developer, but this is really a great topic for anybody who is building a game. And last but not least, we got Oscar, who's producing us. He's going to queue up the videos, the text. He's going to keep us on track. He's going to remind me of the schedule. He's going to go out into the comments. He's going to find out who's got a question. By the way, this is an open forum. So even though it's the four of us here on stage, if you post a comment that, hey, you've got something you want to say about any topic we're talking about today, it could be game engines, could be procedural. By the way, we don't constrain the conversation. We might get into anything, right? If you want to come in and join that conversation, Oscar will get you the StreamYard link. You can join on stage. Like, it doesn't have to just be us. In fact, that's the kind of environment we really want to foster with this, is more talking with you than talking at you. So thanks, Oscar, for helping me keeping us on track here.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, Jason, let's dive right in. I'll ask really annoying question. Unity or Unreal? What do I use for my game?
Kind of depends on your game. The way I look at those engines, they've obviously changed over time. Unreal has very good tools, but you need to do things the Unreal way. You're a little more constrained. It's much harder to customize an engine. Unity is infinitely customizable, but their built-in stuff is not great. So if you're building something that's really custom, that you want to build all the tech yourself, I think for me personally, Unity is a more fun environment for that. But if you're more content focused and what you're building can be built out of sort of the stock stuff, then I think Unreal has huge advantages. Unreal also is headed in a very specific direction around reducing content costs through, throw any number of lights, any number of polygons at it. There's still restrictions, there's still cases or whatever, but they're really going down that route of you can just throw your content in and we will handle it. So that's a particular advantage with Unreal that really nobody else has right now.
And then, so those are the two people talk about the most because they've been available commercially for the longest. But I mean, there are these newer engines like Godot gets mentioned more and more. Just curious perspective on that, or open source as a way to build game engines, which is kind of their strategy.
Yeah, when Unity was actively shooting themselves in the face with the whole debacle last year, I went through and looked at a lot of different engines to see if any of my stuff would be, warrant a port. I even looked at some lesser known ones like Flax, which actually, if you're looking for a Unity alternative, it feels very much like Unity. C# backend, decent renderer, all that stuff. Godot is a really weird one because I feel like it's very much like Blender in a way where the industry has this sort of standard ways of working, and then this comes along completely different and feels very foreign and may or may not end up being a thing over time. I mean, there's definitely a lot of small games done in it, but I think right now it probably wouldn't scale to large productions. I mean, to some degree, Unity is hard to scale to large productions as well. Unreal is the only sort of publicly known engine that I consider, that scales well to very large stuff.
Let's talk about that. When we talk about scales to large stuff, you mean big worlds or big teams, both? Like
big anything. So big teams, because you have problems of data contention and how do we break up work. Big worlds in the sense of streaming and stuff like that. Like Unreal has some pretty nice streaming systems that they've been working on to allow all that stuff to work. It's also very battle tested on large scale titles, right? Versus Unity, which is kind of a scrappier engine, but like as you ship in that engine, the wheels start to fall off of it and you have to like rebuild the car as it's moving, right? So so they and part of that stems from the personality of the people building the engine and what they were trying to solve when they first created it. I'm a big believer that the early code written on any system like that really shapes it long term. And so Unity was trying to be scrappy,
Have we just given up roll your own as a choice on the menu, or
roll your own should be a choice?
Yeah.
I think people don't do it enough. Like my first 20 years in the industry, that was the only choice. If you're doing something that those engines fight against or don't suit well, then it's often a better choice. And it's a lot easier than people think, especially now when there are nice rendering libraries available and libraries for things that you can kind of plug together and build your own engine from.
That was exactly where I was going with it. It feels like we're so tool rich these days that that roll your own, it seems like a better choice than ever. I have a confession to make. Despite having built a crap ton of games, except for my own little personal side projects, I've never professionally worked on a game that wasn't a roll your own engine. Like that's over, a massive list of games. It's just like I've just always worked, even small teams, big teams. I've just managed to dodge. Now, does Frostbite count as an independent? I mean, does Frostbite count as roll your own? I don't know. I guess technically it does.
If you started developing in the last couple of years, Frostbite may not even be something you've heard of before.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's EA's own engine, right? It was funny though, when I first got to using Unity, the most shocking thing for me is probably so mundane. It's that I could go new project and like make a new project, because every studio I'd worked in, the first thing you did when you were starting on a new game was take the old game, rip everything out of it, like go delete a bunch of crap and get it all running again. And so like the idea that there was just a button that I could push and make a new product was like, oh my God, so it's funny, the commercialization of engines has actually pushed usability and things like that way higher on private engines as well. Like now it's not common, or it's more common to be working with an internal engine and have the tools be nicer and like the sort of standard for those types of simple things be much higher.
We got a question from the audience here, which is kind of interesting. How do you incorporate Unreal with AI for AAA games? Hold that thought, because I feel like we got to start from an even broader context first. Jason, let's come back to you and a little bit of the work, or a lot of the work you've done on the Unity asset store. So a lot of it has been procedural tech. Can you just kind of give us a lay of the land of some of the things you've worked on there? And I'm curious if you consider that to be AI anything? Is that even AI?
None of that is AI. It's more procedural. I have always taken the approach of I'm trying to build better brushes, because to me the interesting thing is helping an artist get out their intention. It's not and like how fast can you come out with that intention. So like I made this it's a environment editor called Microverse. It's entirely real time. There's never any baking. Like you move a mountain, everything, all the trees reappear. Like you move a river, it's all in real time. And that's to basically keep the user who's working on building their game in flow, right? You want to be in flow state. You want to be able to move as fast as you can think about what the changes are. And so all of the proceduralism that stems out of that is from, being able to define like how this forest should look, right? And then being able to just like paint, I want the forest here, and like drag out, an area and then have it just appear, right? And then if you change anything, it all changes. And that's for iteration speed and the idea that you can iterate up to the very last minute you ship your game in a non-destructive way and never, because like if you've worked with a lot of train engines, if you want to move where something is, it requires like first repairing where it used to be, right? And getting it back to how it was, and then going and moving it, and it's very time consuming. And to me, whatever tools you're using, whether that's AI, procedural, whatever, it's really about getting somebody's idea out as they see it, because the interesting part to me is that human part of this is what I have in my head and I need to get out, right? It's why, like, when AI first came out and everybody's text prompting stuff, it's neat to get something, right? But it doesn't last that long as an entertainment, because you're kind of getting something that's sort of, you don't feel like you created it, right? And you don't have that personal connection with it. And I think to some degree, the audience has a harder time getting a personal connection if the artist doesn't have that personal connection. And so that's why I favored proceduralism. I do think there's an opportunity to combine those, because AI is very good when it is allowed to make mistakes, and proceduralism can enforce rules very well, right? And so the idea of letting AI be sort of a high-level construct, like somebody, AI generating the idea of a D&D campaign, but then the procedural rules turning that into the 3D graphics, as opposed to just having, one system try to do everything, is kind of an exciting intersection of those texts that I think will be interesting to see.
Even the pre-intersection between those two, though, I guess one thing worth commenting on is we're in this era of now everyone's an AI company, because that's hot. So
right
now you see all this proceduraloism out there, and suddenly it's AI, or it's categorized as AI.
I mean, we're sticking AI on anything that's 500 miles from AI.
It's
right?
e-pets. Right.
Yeah.
It's eyeball aggregators in the 90s. It's just the latest buzz thing. And so everybody's trying to classify their stuff as that because it helps raise money and, makes them look cutting edge. But,
but maybe it's a little more than that. Because, I mean, we legit, I could go reach out, my AI Pearls of Wisdom book over here. I mean, we used to call procedural stuff AI in games for a long time. Like, I mean, that's the light was the
AI now means, LLM, right?
Right. And that's the big switch, is that AI means LLM now. And
Paul, when does Candy Crush just run an AI that figures out how to extract money? I know you can't answer.
I'm legally not.
Tell us about but you said one interesting thing earlier, by the way, which is I didn't realize that you guys were so oriented around sort of homegrown engines for even a game like that. I think I heard that, but then you've made use of a combination of proceduralism, and I feel like the comment Jason said about like giving the artists a better brush. Knowing you, I thought that really resonated.
It did. I felt it hit me right in the feels. Like going back to the very genesis of my career, a big part. So I come from a very early enough in the process where we were not trying to make games as content, right? And so we were trying to make the value prospect to the player was a little different. We were trying to make games that for your $49.95, like, were as big as possible, right? And so it wasn't just the I mean, Jason's examples lay in the art domain, but like over in the game design domain, we were trying to build, I mean, random map generation was everything for games that, I mean, that was not an optional feature, right? And so my early part of my design career was like, how do you make the game, how do you make the game infinitely replayable? Like, roguelikes are my, my form of game design, because you need to build a procedural system that generates an exploratory space that hopefully goes on forever, right? And I've taken that ethos, and built a career around it largely. I mean, these days we some of that procedural work gets hidden underneath the engine, less. I mean, I don't think games are not infinite like in the way they used to be, except indies are, but like the games I'm working on are not infinite in that way. They're usually infinite by virtue of us putting content into them. But on the backside, I still build with an infinite game mindset, because the more I can procedurally decide how some things will get built, the more effective it is, right? I think a surprising number of the games you played, it's really easy to imagine that your cutting edge mobile games, or or your big quadruple A games are oh yeah, they design it once and they sort of just pump content into it. It is so much more messy than that. Like we're over there hammering on Royals. We're not. It's not an automotive assembly line like you think it is. It's bespoke Rolls Royces being hammered into shape far more than we'd like to admit, right? I think that procedural thinking alters that equation. Jason,
I think there's another thing too, which is the procedural you don't see. So like, for instance, all of the Rock Band animations of the characters playing their instruments is all done from, it's procedurally generated from the expert tracks of the game. So when those gems are coming down for your drum or your guitar part, that's actually driving all the animations and the bends and everything, because basically, like, we didn't want to have a content pipeline where we had to motion capture or like hand animate all that stuff, right? So it's being used in a way that doesn't look like, it's not world creation, it's not level creation or whatever. It's just like, we want a fast content pipeline. And because of that, Rock Band has 5,000 downloadable songs and Guitar Hero has 300 because they had to motion capture everything, right? So like, those choices about, which techniques you use to build your result have massive impacts on what you're able to do if you have a success.
So from my side, and I couldn't agree with you more, Jason. You're speaking my language. So from my perspective, I don't get to do that nearly as often as I like, even though I think I'm pretty good at it, because at least in my experience, the engineers and the designers sit too far apart and don't even think this way. That's my experience. I don't know, man. How do you think about it?
I am a big believer that having design separate from everything else is actually a problem. And one of the things that was really interesting in the early days of Harmonix is that we didn't have designers because everyone was in charge of the design. And there comes a point with certain types of games where you need somebody who's going to go and, build quests, or, you need specialization. But I think the thing is to really have those teams work together on solving problems, not that sort of throw it over the wall like, oh, I'm a designer and here's what we want to do, so you go build it. Because often engineers see tons of low-hanging fruit and designers don't know how hard something is, and so they make something that's actually really hard when something else would be fine. And so like, you really have to, and whether that's synergized in one person or across a team, it doesn't really matter, but you really have to have everyone involved in the design and understanding both the what matters about the goals, but also what's possible and what's easy and what's hard to get the best result. So it's not just like, oh, they're not sitting together. It's like, no, you guys need to live like in your pod together and hear everything that's going on. Like, I never wanted an office because I like to be in the middle of the art pit and hear what's going on.
Yeah, I call it full stack design. Let's
come back to David's original question that led into this. I mean, maybe even broader than Unreal, Unity, whatever the major engines are. I mean, I'm not even sure what we mean by AI in this context, because it could mean everything from a pathfinding algorithm for a character to what people are currently talking about AI, which is like making a 3D model from a generative prompt or something, or anything in between those. But just, I guess, Jason, the question would be more of a lay of the land question. Like, are you seeing interesting stuff with AI, or proceduralism, even however you'd like to classify it, in any of the major engines?
I mean, proceduralism is everywhere.
Yeah.
Unity's PCG graph is very similar to Microverse in a lot of ways. It's just a matter of like, how do I manage this content and produce things at a scale that I need, right? I do think the obvious one with LLMs is like, NPCs that can interact on a better level or whatever. But I think we're going to see these coming in, and in all kinds of different cases. But I think the success is going to be how much of a brush is it, as opposed to how much of a generator, right? Like, how specific can I get? How much can I edit what I have to get the actual result? A lot of experimentations I've seen in AI have the ones that have failed is because they have very specific requirements, and the tools don't let them really get that specific. And the ones that have worked, it's been when either, okay, we don't really care about style so much, so just generate, or we've custom trained on our art style to produce variations on the theme that we spent forever getting right.
You just pointed at the thing that I think is at the heart of maybe the thing I'm most exercised about the moment. I want to take us, I think we all were there at the time. I want to take us all back to when desktop publishing came out, and we all got the ability to make just ugly ass documents. like everybody became a publisher, and you remember for about 5 years, everything looked like crap, right? And when we sort of democratized the tools, what doesn't get democratized is taste, right? And I think we're entering where we can see there from here with a lot of this AI gen material. Like I've already gone through the uncanny valley of people. I think your AI gen in your PowerPoint deck is more of a signal that you suck at prompting than it is, hey, I'm smart about using AI. At least in the decks I'm seeing, right? And I don't know. I think the bar for taste is as important or more important than it ever was.
Well, there is a danger there. So, like, I do a lot of work with music. I'm from music school and stuff. And so what you're seeing now is that many of the jobs that could have been done to keep you afloat while you work on your career are going to be able to be done by AI. You're not going to produce music anymore. You're not going to, filler music for backgrounds. Like, you can just generate all that stuff now. So when those jobs go away, and imagine that they go away for art as well, how do you get experts in taste and design when they don't have a pathway where they can earn a living while they build that, right? And so we may end up in a crisis of taste essentially, where we don't have enough people that really know how to get the look correct, right? And so then you get a reduction in quality, which again, it's like people listen to MP3s instead of waves, right? There's like a level of quality we're willing to reduce for quantity. But when I look at the overall content landscape in any industry, quantity has not been our problem. Quality is the problem, right? So coming up with ways that we can generate more that's not at a high quality level doesn't really get us much.
Yeah, it enables a few at scale game types that we've all sort of fantasized about. But I'm with you 100%. Like that's really where I was going with that. Is that like it feels like we've always had enough people to make quantity, with the exception of building the holodeck, right? And of course we're all excited about our holodecks, but I don't know, man. I see the crisis of taste coming, and I think it's already arrived.
It's why, to me, the interesting thing about AI is how can this be a brush, not how can this just generate what I want as an end result, right?
I love the analogy. Got to do a quick station identification here, and then we're going to introduce our first live guest who communicated with Oscar, just like I said, and is now going to come up to the stage. But let me just comment on that's a good reminder that this is your program. You can join this. You can be part of it live. You don't have to be pre-scheduled as a guest. Jason was pre-scheduled as a guest, but that could be any of you, particularly during the live program. So if you have a topic you want to bring up that's contextually related to anything we're covering, by all means, like, join us, turn your camera on, and you can be part of this broadcast. And hey, if you have something that's a little bit of a different direction you want to talk about, you think is super current for this week, come on board. Like, we want to hear from you. This is your platform. But let's introduce William Volk here. William, thanks for deciding to join us. Super quick intro to yourself so everybody knows where you're coming from, and then what do you have to add to the conversation?
Well, I'm William Volk. I've been in the game industry since I was in grad school, so I've been in the game industry probably as long as anyone has. First game was shipped on cassette tape.
Computer system in the background?
Yeah, that's my office, by the way. Just kidding. I collect shit. No, it's not. It's not. I'm being silly. But yeah, and I started out at Avalon Hill as a play tester, and then I built free games for them, and eventually I meandered into Activision. Got very lucky because not only did I get hired at Activision, but I knew Bobby Kotick before he took over Activision. So we had a product that had failed totally. Bobby kept me on, and it was a really successful product that took Activision out Chapter 11. Then I went to mobile. Well, I then went to education, did over 100 CDs for the PlayStation that were sent to schools. That was Lightspan. Then I went into mobile. Then I did some work with the Shiba Inu people. Pretty early in mobile as well. I did mobile games with the Wayans brothers before the iPhone ever shipped. Currently working on a Real Money Casino, as well as my casual game stuff, which is a movie trivia game that is a homage to You Don't Know Jack in a way. But
all right.
So
well,
you've
been here from the beginning, and you're going to help us shut down the industry with Web3 games. No, only kidding. I have customers.
No. The interesting thing, I was on a conversation this morning with someone who is a principal at a $2-point-something billion casino company. And we were just laughing because we were talking about how utterly crappy the Web3 games are. This was the conversation. It's like, oh yeah, the only reason the people are playing that game in that country because they think they can make money and Yeah, I've had this discussion over and over again.
Casinos know how to do that. That's already a business. So you might as well just lean all the way in. So, William, what did you want to bring to the conversation?
Oh, I actually worked on procedural games. Yeah, I worked on procedurally generated games early in my career, even though Wikipedia disagrees. What happened is it was like, what else could I do? Let's take, like, for example, the original Mac, 128 kilobytes of RAM. I did a product called the Pyramid of Peril, and I couldn't possibly have the levels exist before I did the game. So I algorithmically generated the entire levels, all the passages, doors, objects, creatures, and so on, completely randomized because there's no other way of doing it. That's the whole story behind that game. But so I want to say about AI, a couple things. One, because of DeepSeek, the venture community is sort of, their opinion is shifting on AI a little bit. They're not as gung-ho as they were a couple of weeks ago. It's really funny.
Can I jump in there, William? That, to me, the question there is why? Because the cool thing about DeepSeek is the ability to run that model on your own PC, and pretty much a very mediocre PC can run.
It's a very low energy model. God, if they could only do that with Bitcoins, right?
But it's like now you've got actual ability to run language models on your own machine. You could
all true,
which gives you the ability of integrating that with a game.
Here's a fact of life, though.
It's not a way to build a business.
The way venture capital works is go to a soccer game with 6-year-olds, and wherever the ball is, all the kids are going to run to that ball. They don't hold their positions, right? So venture community was super hot on AI, and when NVIDIA's tanked and ChatGPT, blah, 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 all that sort of went down, they get kind of nervous. It's so weird. I'm sorry. This is what I'm hearing.
What you just said, up until DeepSeek, they thought there were 15 horses on the field, and they just found out there are 500 horses on the field, and they're going to need a moment to regroup and come back. Right?
But also the valuations, suddenly it doesn't take billions of dollars to do it. I mean, they poured a lot of money into companies that said they need that money to build what they're building, and DeepSeek sort of blew that apart. Just an observation. I will say this much, though. About a year and a half ago, I was on a bike ride like I usually am, and I was having coffee, and I ran into a guy wearing a T-shirt from, Rockstar Games, and he told me he was retired and all that. And the question I asked him, I go, "How far away are we from using LLMs for the characters?" Because if you look at the cost of building the games and all that, one of the big things now is getting all that dialogue in there and programming all the dialogue. Can that be done? Well, it was a difficult problem before DeepSeek. Now it looks like you could pull it off. You could actually ship a game with some level of character intelligence and conversations that are basically, I mean, people are, I don't know who, I don't want to mention names, but one person who's very anti-AI in the game industry is like saying, oh my God, it's going to be horrible. They'll say terrible things. They'll tell people to kill themselves and blah, 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 blah. You know, yeah, that's possible.
I'm not so concerned about the saying terrible thing. Like, okay, that probably is a minor issue, but that can become a big issue if the exact wrong thing is said. But to me, the opportunity with LLMs isn't just make my Baldur's Gate 3, my favorite game of all time, personally. When you make Baldur's Gate 4 someday, which I don't know if that will ever happen, but I'll dream about it happening. But I don't dream of it happening with all those characters being LLM driven. I think, first of all, there is something to the very crafted experience of those interactions. Two, the gameplay experience is not about me maximizing my NPC dialogue time with those characters. It's about getting to particular plot points. So I don't want more conversations. I want meaningful conversations.
Or the NPCs to act in meaningful ways.
And and three, there's sort of something to be said for the shared experience too. The fact that I can talk to my friends about the same thing that we did.
Right. That's really good. That's cogent.
Points we made, I think, are important from game design. I do think LLMs could be really, really interesting to start whole new categories of games that aren't really possible right now without that. But it's not to make my existing NPC games like 10 times as long conversations with the characters so that we can talk about anything, whether it's relevant to the plot or not. Oh, by the way, remember when I said we wouldn't talk about AI on every episode of Game Development Livestream? We've now hit that prediction 0% of the time. So
no, I came in here and that's what the thing I missed yesterday's. It would have been much more fun to talk about Web3 and games and diss some of the Web3 games around there. That would have been more enjoyable.
You can diss them real fast, but this is not the Web3 talks.
No, we're done with that. No,
diss or hype.
I just came up this morning and I had to bring it up. Yeah. I use LLMs mainly for things like I need to generate meaningful movie quotes from 150 movies. Give me an Excel file that does that, and I have to check it, but it does save a lot of time to do that. Like, or what's a good short description of this movie? The one interesting thing that hit me in AI recently is a thing called, I'm going to give them a plug because it's really fantastic. It's called Any Mail Finder. I don't know how they pulled it off, but what they're doing is they're using AI and they're generating emails for people you want to get in touch with that are verifiable. That when they say it's a real email to that person. And I think they're actually hitting their the mail servers and pinging them.
It's been around for a while. I wouldn't really call it.
Well, Rocket Reach is a piece of crap compared to this. So just want to bring it up. Yeah. So they claim they're doing something in AI. All I know is it's the first time I've ever used one of these things that actually worked, because most of them are like utter garbage. Yeah. So if you work at Screen Rant or Rotten Tomatoes, please don't be mad at me because I probably emailed you today. Everyone involved with anything there, because I did that today to you. Sorry.
I don't know. Let's piss off some different companies. Jason, what's wrong with game engines today?
I mean, depends which one you're talking about. We've all got problems, and there's a lot of it's just general software problem. Like the bigger the thing you make, the more, problems you solve, just the more bloat and more complexity, and we're also just seeing engine teams like, an engine team for like in Harmonix, we were like 10 people, and then Unity comes along and hits 8,000 people. How do you even do that? Right? Like, no wonder they're having problems. And the range of platforms keeps getting wider, which makes the problems harder. So I don't know if there's like what's wrong with game engines. It's just like what's the challenge set with this particular one. I don't know.
I have a general thesis of software, which is it always mostly gets worse. It has better features that it gets added over time. But software in general, it seems like it gets worse the longer it's around.
Oh, it does. It becomes combinatorially more complex with every feature you add. It definitely gets worse.
There are definitely moments in engineering where I've had where like I suddenly realized that the thing that we had been doing forever could all be done in like a page of code, right? And I've had that happen with like the camera system that I built for Disruptor Beam was based off the one I built for Harmonix, which was based off of years of writing camera systems and realizing that like, okay, this is all this really needs to be. But a lot of times you have to write a thing a bunch of times before you get there. And so like these engines have these big systems that have been written, and it's very hard to change them. It's very hard to not support a feature you used to. So they're kind of locked into this accelerated collection of cruft. You know?
Which engine company do you think is best positioned just in their DNA to take advantage of new AI technologies that we've been talking about?
I don't know. You know, Epic is kind of gone another way in that I'm sure they're exploring AI and stuff, but their whole thing has been scan the world, proceduralism, make anything run in our engine no matter what. So I think they're less interested maybe in like a content pipeline built out of generative AI because of the problems it has versus what they're doing and the momentum they already have. Unity's, you know, going along that route. I actually think the more interesting things are going to come from small applications that do one thing well than they are from the big game engine companies.
There was an interesting report, I think it must be a year or maybe 2 years ago now, from A16Z, the big venture firm. They've got a gaming fund. Maybe you can locate the report, Oscar, and bring it up. But they did a report on game engines, and their general take was that, I mean, of course, they're investing in the next new thing, so they're kind of in the business of slamming the incumbents.
Sure.
Not necessarily super close to throwing the incumbents out, in my opinion, even the ones that fucked up big time with business models, like one of the two big ones.
Yeah.
But they had kind of a thesis that the game engine of the future almost has to be rethought from the ground up for a couple of reasons. One is procedural and content and generative content creation is going to be so inherent to the creative process that you're constantly iterating around that in the future, was sort of one aspect. And the second is that the game engines as they are now, from a developer standpoint, are not really multi-user or multiplayer products. Like they envisioned that are true. In the engine together, working collaborative, generating things, putting things together in real time in the engine with a team, as opposed to that whole complexity of team dynamics that we talked on in the first couple minutes.
Well, we do have a rise of a different type of engine, which is basically spun out of Dreams on the PlayStation. I don't know if you guys ever remember that game, but everything in Dreams is built as a very different renderer. Now we're seeing things like Unbound, which is assigned distance field, you know, modeling construction set. And those are like Dreams honestly kind of hit the metaverse goals that everybody's shooting for early and kind of wasn't a success because of a bunch of reasons. It was kind of too early.
Yeah, the metaverse is like a $0 billion business. Everyone thinks it's going to be great, but it's like...
Oh, I totally disagree with that. Like, arguably the biggest game engine is actually just Minecraft.
Yeah, Minecraft is great. Minecraft, and also Roblox. Roblox is a big game engine.
Yeah, Minecraft is the metaverse. Let's just be clear.
I like that.
You don't have a better metaverse.
That's right.
Yet.
But you know,
I
it's
think
interesting because Minecraft.
I thought Fortnite was like the commercial metaverse. Sorry, Jason.
I mean, there's a bunch of companies trying this kind of thing, but like the thing that made Minecraft work is that your core primitive of a block is easy to understand, easy to grok. We saw all those Minecraft clones that tried to do like smooth voxel stuff, and they all failed because it wasn't the representation being pretty that mattered. It was the feeling of, oh, I created this thing and I understand how to create it almost immediately because the only thing I have to understand is a block.
It's an example of where constraints can be a good thing. The fact that it's all blocks actually is a constraint that turns out it allows people to not have to worry about a lot of things. They can just go ahead and build stuff immediately. It's easy.
Yeah.
And you know, I was going to mention that there are some small game engines that are specific to a certain genre. For example, for visual novels is Ren'Py, and Ren'Py is fine, great. I used it for a product. It's fantastic at what it does, you know, because it's so focused at that one thing, right? It's
Right.
And people like the turnkey stuff, you know.
But that's why I was kind of alluring to earlier that I think like if we end up with an engine that's like I don't think the big engines necessarily will be the ones that come out with the interesting AI stuff. It'll be more some small team on a very specific vector, right? That they push that thing as far as it can go in their own language and their own stuff, as opposed to like, oh, we're replacing traditional systems with like AI enhanced ones.
So what happens when the ultimate engine is no engine, right? I mean, that's where some of I mean, that's the tack on the big future, you know, the big horizon right now. Like, you know, what happens when I have 60 frame a second Midjourney, right? You know, that's using, you know, player inputs as one of the contexts for the image. I mean, we're already seeing test cases of this, like the what was that not Doom RL, but the basically the imagined Doom game that doesn't actually have a game engine behind it. It's just a image generation LLM that's been trained on the game Doom, right? So when we have high frame rate image generation with player input as the context, don't we have no engine as the engine?
On a silly note, someone got Doom to run in a PDF.
Yeah. I saw that.
I still think that's not
went on a pregnancy test. Like, it's crazy. But,
I think that might not be as interesting as we think it is. Like,
Okay.
and here's why. So, like, there's a guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he posts on Twitter and Blue Sky, and he does stuff where he'll model stuff really quickly, but then and he does it usually in dreams, but he also uses Unbound and stuff. But then he'll have AI enhance that.
Right.
And I think I still come back to the premise that and I'm skipping the word right now in my head for it, but like ownership and building something that matters.
There's a lack of intentionality to it. Is that what you're going?
That matters, and that reads through a piece of art as the interesting part, even if you can get the quality to the same quality bar, right? Like, even if every frame looks just as good as reality, that an artist's intention is going to actually be what makes that interesting.
I mean, you see that there are a lot of games that have a very stylized look that doesn't look anything like reality and do really well, you know. And, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I'd ask, how important is a director to a movie? You know, like I think you can project artistic intentionality onto a thing without different layers in the experience, I guess.
Yeah. So, but like you look at Gollum, right? Gollum is entirely CGI. Why does it work? Because you have Andy Serkis in there doing the acting and bringing him to life,
and Peter Jackson directing it.
And a good script, and all the bits. Yeah. But like, they chose to have somebody in a suit to get those little subtle details and stuff. And we'll probably get to the point where we can generate all kinds of stuff that looks real, but bringing it to life is kind of its own thing.
Well, Cameron shoots with 3D cameras. I mean, he shoots with stuff that is video game based stuff, so that he can see what the actors are doing as they'll be in the real movie.
It's like Mandalorian with the live sets. And,
right. Yeah. But also having the actors become the creatures of Avatar. They're you don't see the person, you see the thing that's going to be, because that's how he does his movies and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
And the places where we've injected, I mean, they're like, wasn't it one of the latest Star Wars movies where they reconstructed somebody entirely in CG? And
reconstructed Luke. Luke walks in. It's the Mandalorian, I think, and he walks in to take care of the robots, and they recreate Luke Skywalker. Yeah.
And also
spoiling the Mandalorian for everybody, William. No, only kidding. It's a few.
I do wonder if they had an actor go in.
By the way, Bruce Willis is dead all throughout that movie. No, sorry.
I do wonder if they had an actor go in and sub out all the motion and things for that, right? Because
oh my God,
I don't know. Like, we get really good at producing realistic images and getting things to a quality bar and everything. But there's just something about
it was a performance capture that was then remapped using I think original bust that they had of what's his name, the Grand Admiral You know who I'm talking
Yeah.
about from
it was the
Road
Thrawn
One.
thing. Yeah.
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 I do feel like there is something to this idea of that A16Z is talking about, which is sort of like the multi-userness of the building environment becoming important to the crafting process. And I feel like that's where Minecraft actually, there's the primitives aspect of the building with simple blocks, and the fact that like the simplicity of it made it so much more accessible to people. Like that's a huge part of it. But then that you can just jump in with your friends. Like my son is a huge Minecraft player. He's like in this game, I don't want to even think, thousands of hours at this point. But he's in there with his friends and they build stuff together, even when it isn't like go and code something in Java to add a feature. It's just building and collaborating together. And that's an aspect that's missing from the commercial engines that I think is interesting to think about. And that's where the AI and the procedural stuff, you bolted onto that, it could get interesting. Paul, seems like you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I want to just throw in the usual maybe, because like I think we're back to special case, right? A lot of the games that, it's really easy to point to Minecraft, and I agree with you, by the way. Minecraft, is the metaverse, or Roblox is the metaverse. I like, those are provocative and pretty true thoughts. But like you also invoked Baldur's Gate, which is famously a single player experience, right? The game I work on is a famously mostly single player experience. Like I can go down a list of like most profitable, biggest, use whatever criteria you want, experiences, and the social games are super present, but they are far from exhaustive, right? And so I'm not sure. I mean, I agree with you for the specific application. I mean, if I was working on a game like, those kind of games where it's multiplayer, if it's a social context, yes. But I don't know why I need what you just described for to build Baldur's Gate 4. Right?
Yeah,
Except for maybe
there's been a number of engines that had like kind of multi-developer things, and it never took off.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, if you're doing pro work, you don't actually need that most of the time. But like if you're doing consumer level stuff where it's like I would get together with my friends, it's a social experience, that's totally different, right?
Yeah, totally.
There's a reason like Google Docs lets you work together, but Photoshop doesn't. Right?
I'm just imagining Photoshop and Google Docs.
Trying to paint with somebody else. Stop it.
Be a living nightmare.
Yeah.
Then there's
makes sense for Google Docs.
It's interesting though to then look at something like UEFN, where they've tried to lock down the environment a lot. Like I like the idea of UEFN, the ability to like build around this core of gameplay that obviously 100 million plus people love doing all the time.
Right.
But like every little thing, every asset you make has to go through an approval process, which is like the next level. It's like the next level up from the App Store. Like first we had to fight with Apple to let them just release the damn game, and they'd comment about a couple of things they run into. Now it's like every asset in the game has to have an approval process, and that seems like, I mean, I have two kind of thoughts on this. One is that's just an annoying process. So,
I mean, is it all about time to penis, or
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Probably
time to
Well, that value capture.
Seconds. Yeah.
Probably part of it. I mean, it's also an impediment to like how could you ever do generative or even procedural content in that environment if you've got to put all these generations into a approval process? Maybe procedural,
because it's not a edit time operation, right? Like where I'm using it to generate a specific thing, and then the specific thing is what ships. Runtime generation, where it's like, okay, well, you're going to produce variants on a theme, or you're going to produce whatever the user wants. That's a whole other thing. And I don't know, it's like
both are problematic actually, because runtime generation, I'm not sure actually their thoughts on that, but maybe it could be constrained if they see it as very.
How the hell do you even QA that? Like,
but also like what will happen is the amount of content entering the approval process will explode by some huge percentage if you have generative content in the pipeline. It's like, thank you. Prove all 1,000 Midjourney images.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
then
we've
it's
already
robots
seen
approving
that.
robots. Then it's robots approving robots all the way down. Yo, dog, I heard you like robots. so I put robots in your robots.
The Unity Asset Store and Epic Store have been flooded with AI generated icons and stuff, because basically as soon as somebody was like, hey, I could just hook this thing up and generate packages and ship them, somebody did it, you know?
Yeah.
And if it's if it's a Web3 game, it's robots playing your game too. So
Yeah.
Well, we got so many bots out there.
had
in
to
those
mock
games.
that for a bit. I
Yeah.
actually know some people building Web3 games that are quite genuine, but that is a typical use case for many Web3 games out there. Because
Well,
they're
certainly
actually,
for a lot of the Web3 metaverses, a lot of them are bot city. Yeah.
Well, it's because we're harnessing activity and not engagement. I mean, I think we're, we need some currency of authenticity. I mean, I think we're headed toward the authenticity. I've already mentioned it. I think we're headed toward an authenticity or a crisis of style. I do think the value of authenticity rises in this environment. But I guess if I want to shout out anything from this conversation before it's over, it's I love Jason's idea that like what happens to when the middle gets pulled out of, like how do we map, how do people achieve a level of that when the intervening steps are yanked out of the middle? Like that's a pretty provocative concept.
I do think the business model is at play here. When we made games that were about producing the most fun game we could, nobody was botting them. As soon as we put long curves like early MMOs with grind, or long curves for monetization reasons, etc., then everyone bots them. So I am not, even though I've worked on all those models and stuff, I don't love them because they are making us produce games that are more compulsion than they are joy. And ultimately, like, I got into this industry to make the most fun things possible and to watch people light up from that. And I think, like, as long as we're using free-to-play models, advertising-based models, any of these business models that we're doing now, you're going to see botting because people are just trying to get to the fun part.
True.
so
But
you
it depends go ahead, John.
no, go, Paul. Ask my.
I was just saying, well, the botting is only bad when it's bad, and what I mean by that is not every game model actually requires a level playing field competition. Like bots suck when you're trying to compare your work to another person. They largely are irrelevant if I'm playing a solid. I'm back to Baldur's Gate. Why do I care if John bots his Baldur's Gate 3 game? Like, so I guess we're back to game form. Game form matters when we start talking about a lot of these concepts, right? We always forget about solitaire games, and yet I feel like a lot of
I mean, I made the mistake once of taking the example of the shared drawing game that was really popular, I guess, in 2000. Draw This. And launching a word game that was two player only, and stupid, dumb mistake. A really brilliant sort of word game that was like, like the ones where you tried to find words, but it was basically balloons. And when you found a word, they pop and new balloons would float in. It was fast. It was exciting. And we screwed up totally because we took the example of Draw This as like, we have to do that. But no, we didn't have to do that at all. And then another example, we had the best-selling bocce ball game on the iPhone, and we wasted a lot of effort making it multiplayer. Bocce is a very tough game.
That is a very specific deep cut, William.
Well, the bocce game, for example, if you're playing bocce ball, the actual bocce ball game itself is a difficult game to do multiplayer because your turn is very short or it isn't. And what we probably need to do is actually create a bocce-like game for the multiplayer aspect of it and keep the regular bocce ball game as a solo game. But, that was a 1 million download game with no advertising. And, we did so many it was there's a whole bunch of stupidity.
You forgot to ask the 1 million people who cared got it, and then you forgot to ask them if they wanted to.
Well, here's the dumbest thing ever in the existence of mobile games, maybe the dumbest. It hit #1 in Italy without even being mentioned, and no one bothered. We were so tied to a license we had that got the company sold. So I sold this company based on a license I had gotten for a particular poker game. And because of that, we were so focused on that, no one had the energy or the effort to take the game and convert it to Italian, to localize it, even though it was #1 game in Italy for some time. It was like, I could do let me just go into a GDC rant. GDC doesn't like to hear stories about failures. Otherwise, I would do that,
But there's a good use case for your AI plugin.
Oh yeah, AIZ makes that stuff cake. Oh, speaking of the App Store, I will say the current mobile game the game I have, which is web and mobile, is actually created. The original was created in 2015 because of an Apple rejection. So Apple rejected a very funny, humorous game, and we took the same engine and turned it into the movie trivia game because Apple can be difficult. So now when I build stuff for casual, I'm doing web/mobile because I never can tell what Apple will or Google will do. You can't determine that.
I'm aware of a project that was working on a James Bond game for the App Store that needed to go on Apple Arcade. And the game was basically, I don't know, a few $1 million into production. And then they brought it to Apple, and Apple was like, can you take the guns out of this game?
Well, that was the old Mortal Kombat.
No guns. Okay.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's the old Mortal Kombat versus Sega versus Nintendo thing, if you remember. That's what made. That's what one of the things that made Genesis big was the fact that Mortal Kombat and the Genesis had blood.
With a cheat code.
Yeah.
Right, Jason. So
that's a good story, by the way. The James Bond story. I'll remember that one. Yeah.
So for a student who's maybe, I don't know, they're in college, they're post college, they want to make money as a game developer. They don't want to just be someone messing around with an engine in their free time. They want to work in the industry in a game. What should they learn an engine, or should they build an engine?
They should learn as much as they can and produce actionable results from it. I did some lecturing across a bunch of schools for a while, and I saw such a range. I saw one person come up to me who told me they wanted to be a lead designer, and I said, great, show me something you've designed. And they're like, well, I'm not a programmer. And I'm like, what year are you in? He's like, 4th year. And I'm like, you're never going to get into this industry because
you're done.
You haven't taken the first step.
Yeah.
So ultimately what I look for when I see young people is like this question of, are they going to do something anyway? Are they going to do it because they just love it so much? And the people that I've hired who've been like that have always worked out because they're just going to work at it and figure it out. So, I don't think you can build your own thing. You can learn Unity, you can learn Unreal, you can learn some obscure engine. But at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is show people cool things that you've built that show that you worked through the problems and will figure it out, because the challenges that you're going to face on the next game have nothing to do with the challenges you faced before. It's like a
shipping is your best feature.
Yeah, and it's I look at it,
real geniuses ship. Right. I like that.
And I look at it like a stand-up comedian who builds up this routine, does his Netflix special, and then throws out every joke he's written and starts from nothing. Right? Yeah. It's like, because it's not like I have some special formula because I worked on Guitar Hero or Rock Band that's going to make the next thing a hit. It's just that I'm going to work my ass off to do the best thing I can do, and I'm going to do that every time. And so those are the people I'm looking for. And if your results show that, that'll get you hired.
It's your library of processes, though, that you're carrying from project to project.
Yeah,
and your processes and your expectations, right?
Patterns of tech or whatever, you get better at it. But there's no guarantees in this industry. There's too many things out of your control. And anybody who thinks that, I don't know, any particular hire or whatever is going to give them some guarantee, it's like that they're just lying to themselves. And people love to lie to themselves. But people that are just going to build things anyway, they're always going to build something cool. Whether it sells or not, that's another thing.
I love the shipping comment. It's the biggest thing I tell to everybody. So
Steve Jobs. Yeah.
I have a thesis that just the core of successful teams is just constant shipping and your velocity in the development process. If you can master velocity and ship, you can just start with crap and you'll eventually get there, right? You can get there. Most of what I worked on was crap for most of the way, or even 100% of the way, and then we even fixed it later. But I feel like that's just how game development works a lot of the time. But where it doesn't work at all is it's a GDD or a pitch deck, and you're constantly iterating the pitch deck in response to what other people are telling you about the GDD and the pitch deck. Yeah, just the pitch deck, I get it. You need one to get the attention of a publisher or a VC. But what you really need is playable product, because I feel like what impresses the investor or the publisher more actually is they saw the pitch deck with the build at the time, and then you go back to them a week later and you're like, here's the new stuff that we just shipped. And then it's 2 weeks later and we just did another one, and here's what we learned. And like constantly ship and be learning from the building and the crafting process.
I also feel like you can't just go in with a pitch deck anymore.
No.
No, you can't. At the very least, you
those
need.
days are over.
If you have a video that portrays the play of the game, that might be enough. But you can't go in with just a pitch deck.
I think unless real software or go home. Like I feel like you know, people aren't interested in it. I mean, all those people we're talking about is that 4th year student that Jason talked about. They're all that person.
Glenn Ross version I got to write. That's about shipping the damn game. Like,
Do any of you guys remember Prince of Persia: Sands of Time?
Of course.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Fantastic game. The first thing done on that game was an animator animated the prince running, going up the wall and jumping to a platform and pulling himself up. And he happened to be roommates with one of the programmers at the company. They were kind of an untested team, and they built that. And they were like, this is what we're building.
That's
Right?
smart.
You don't need to build something large. It can be hacked together like lame ships. That was a big expression in harmonics. Like, nobody's going to see how this is made. Show the experience, get it in some way that somebody can understand what you're trying to build and why it's special as fast as possible.
Hey, I mean, I think we worked on about like 5 versions of this game before we built the one that actually was going to be any good. And I know you were not. You had issues even with what we did ship, but we had. But the only regret I had is like, I wish the 5 versions that were completely not the right idea, we had figured out a little bit faster, but that's kind of the process of game building, but you find that out from shipping. Like, we could have made the most perfect pitch deck and an amazing GDD about any one of those 5, even though it wasn't really playable when you got down to the experience of the game, or it just wasn't good enough. So just ship. And speaking of which, we're at the top of the hour, so we've shipped episode number 3, and we're going to keep shipping. We're going to go with exactly what we just proposed here. We're going to ship every week, good or bad. I think we're doing pretty well. We're bringing.
This was enjoyable. Yeah.
So join us again next week. It's going to be the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. We're going to do this every single week. And we're going to build the biggest audience out there of game developers who are building games. And I hope you found this really useful. I think there were some real nuggets of knowledge here. Jason, you're welcome to come back anytime you want to talk to us and join in the conversation with game developers here. You know so much, having worked here, for a while and been deep in the tech, but also the craft. Like, I think in the intro, we didn't pay enough service to not only the deep tech, but the craft of game making that you're so deeply involved in for years. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I will just add that my biggest success in games came after one of the biggest failures. So I agree with the ship, and learn from it. Yeah.
You haven't had a big failure in games. You just haven't been at it long enough.
Oh my God. Never Goddesses of Phobos 2. What can I say? LGOP 2. That really sucked. Yeah.
Thanks,
everybody. We'll do it again
combo.
next week. Thanks for being
here. All right. Bye, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, John.